guys live? You excited? Are you ready? So this is the most extraordinary time ever to be alive. In this room are the minds, the wealth, the passion, the intelligence to solve any problem. And I'm going to hit on this over and over again. The whole reason that Ray and I created this institution is because we're entering a period of time that's different than any time ever in human history, right? There's a time today in which over the next 20 years, we're going to have the ability to take on challenges and problems like never before. And the conversation I have here in Silicon Valley all the time is people have no idea how fast things are changing. Are you guys with me on that? I mean, the conversations that we're seeing happening in quantum computing, in molecular genetics, in AI, in robotics, in 3D printing, are conversations that are crazy, truly science fiction. But the fact is that they're materializing, they're happening. And while you might be thinking in one particular line, what you're not seeing, what I'm not seeing, are the hundreds of other small bubbling technologies that are coming and converging and changing the world. So we are truly living during the most extraordinary time ever in human history. And I think you're here because you can feel it, because you can feel that this is different. You can feel the power that we have as individuals now that equates to what only the largest governments and corporations could do 20 years ago. And if you want to do something, you can, right? There's more capital than ever before. More capital will be $100 billion in crowdfunding. There's more angel, more venture, more any kind of capital. There's more access to knowledge than any time ever in human history. And so the question is, what do you want to do? It's really the power and the passion of the human mind more than anything else. You guys feel that? Do you understand that? I mean, that, I hope, if nothing else, what you'll take away from this global summit is that empowerment of you as an individual. What I'd like to do is take a second now and read something that Ray Kurzweil and I have been working on for a little bit. It's an SU Founder's Vision and Credo. And we'll be producing this and getting us out, but if you'd give me a second, I'm going to just read this because it's the basis for what we created here at Singularity University. So, let's begin. We live in a world of rapidly accelerating technologies, computation, artificial intelligence, robotics, augmented and virtual reality, digital manufacturing, genomics, biotechnology, sensors, networks, and nanotechnology. Each successive generation of technology provides the tools to create the next with ever-improving outcomes. At Singularity University, we believe in the power of entrepreneurship and that virtually any problem can be solved. Further, that the world's biggest problems represent the world's biggest opportunities to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people. And while the greatest universities on earth offer deep technical knowledge in specific disciplines, Singularity University was founded with 3 primary purposes in mind. First, to educate individuals and organizations across the breadth of exponential technologies. Second, to empower the visionary leaders with an abundance mindset. And third, to build communities who are creating solutions to humanity's grandest challenges. Because today's technologies afford individuals and small teams the ability to accomplish what was once only possible by the largest corporations and governments, we recognize that with such great power comes great responsibilities. Singularity University, therefore, also focuses on exploring and defining the ethical standards that will enable the world to realize the promise of accelerating technologies, while avoiding the peril that invariably accompanies these new technologies. These, then, are the guiding principles upon which Singularity University was founded. We welcome to SU all who dare to make the world a better place and help share the future of humanity. So that is our credo, and I hope those of you who are already part of SU have heard that, know that, will share that. So, What I'd like to do is follow on what Will was presenting, build on that. That's normally the first half of the presentation I give, to talk a little bit about the implications of exponential technologies. As Will mentioned, I had a chance to write a book called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, and many of you have seen this or heard this. Actually, before we get started, can I see, how many of you in the room here are an SU alumnus of the GSP or the executive program? Could you raise your hands? Great, and how many, this is fantastic, welcome. And how many folks, this is the first Singularity University event you've been to? Can you raise your hands? Wow, amazing, fantastic. Welcome to the SU family. One of the basic premises then of what we teach at Singularity University is that we're living in a world that is getting better at an ever-increasing rate. And while I wrote this book based on sort of the learnings that I was seeing at SU and at X Prize, the question that people ask is, why are you so damn positive about the future? Don't you watch the news? And the answer to that is that I don't watch the news. And I look at the data. So I want to talk about the first part. I think it's a very important premise that I base a lot of my work on, is that as we as humans were evolving on the savannas of Africa hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, back then, in that world, if you missed a piece of good news, like some food over there, well, that's too bad. You missed a piece of bad news, like a rustle in the leaves was a lion and not the wind, your genes were out of the gene pool. And so we evolved an ancient piece of the temporal lobe called the amygdala that scans everything you see and everything you hear for negative news. And if you hear or see negative news, it puts you on red alert, like the Dow is plummeting or there's an explosion someplace. And for that reason, that we spend 10 times more attention on negative news than positive news, our friends in the news media feed us 10 times more news on the negative side than the positive side. And today, I often call the news media a drug pusher, where negative news is their drug. I call CNN the crisis news network or the constantly negative news network, right? And on every device that we get, tomorrow morning, if you're staying here at the hotel and you're getting a newspaper, I step over the newspaper. But if you happen to pick it up, look at the number of negative stories to positive stories. It's not that they're not true. It's that there's no counterbalance, right? There's no one standing outside of SFO saying there was no airplane crash here today, right? Or outside the local high school saying there was no school shooting here today. So all we get transmitted to us over and over and over again in high definition in our living rooms is negative media around the planet. But the question is, what else is going on? If you look at the data over the last 100 years, the global income of the planet has more than tripled in every nation. Lifespan has more than doubled. Food has dropped 13-fold. Energy has dropped 30-fold. Communications have dropped thousands of fold. And the realization I had is that technology is the force that takes what used to be scarce and makes it abundant. Right? So if I have an orange tree up here on stage and I go and I pluck the oranges from the lowest hanging branches, all of a sudden oranges become scarce until I invent a piece of technology called a ladder. And the ladder gives me a higher reach and gives me access to more oranges. What could be more scarce than perfect diamonds? But again, we see technology taking what used to be scarce and making it abundant. So one of the companies I admire and I support and advise here in the valley is called the Diamond Foundry. And they've built devices that have methane, water, and electricity coming in one end and perfect diamonds coming out the other. 2 carats, 3 carats, 5 carats, 8 carats. You want a diamond with some flaws in it? No problem, we can do that too. So we are over and over taking what we used to think of as scarce and turning it into abundance. And technology is the force that does that. And I'll say to you right here that I fundamentally believe there is nothing that is truly scarce in the world. And that if you've built a company, a product, or a service based upon metering out scarcity a little piece at a time, that company will not survive over the next couple of decades. So let's take a look at some of the data. This is from the cover of The Economist, that we're heading towards the end of poverty, that in the next 20 years, 30 at the outmost, we have the ability to create a world in which every single man, woman, and child has their basic needs being met. The number of democracies on planet Earth have gone from a small handful to 100 over the last 200 years. This is from a book a friend of mine, Steven Pinker at Harvard, wrote called The Better Angels of Our Nature, which shows us we're living during the most peaceful time ever in human history. Now, again, you wouldn't know watching, the Crisis News Network. But the fact of the matter is the data is different. And while I, sort of pummel on CNN all the time, what I'd like to do is a friend of mine, Fareed Zakaria, did a fantastic job about 3 weeks ago presenting the data. I want to show a short video clip just so that you can really, truly feel and understand what's going on in the world today. Sorry, if we can get that working, we'll show it in a second. But what Fareed shows us is that global terrorism over the last 50 years is actually reduced by a factor of 3, except for a slight uptick in a few countries like Syria and parts of the Middle East, right? And we forget to look at the fundamental data. Let's look at this chart. This is the number of children per family around the world. In the early 1950s, 100 countries around the world had 6 or more children per family. 2 things reduce population growth rate pressures. Do you know what they are? Call them out. Education and healthcare. You make a population more educated, and yes, educating women is the best way to do that. I heard that. And you make a population healthier, and you go into negative growth rate. Right? I was in Morocco a few years ago. 30 years ago, 7.8 children per family in Morocco. The new king and queen come in, put in better healthcare, better education. It's dropped from 7.8 down to 2.8. So we're living in a world where we have the ability to get rid of this population growth rate pressure. My friends here in the Valley are worried about underpopulation on planet Earth, not overpopulation on planet Earth. This is worldwide life expectancy. For all of human history, the average human lifespan was no more than 26. You'd have a baby at age 13, then you'd help that baby grow up till it was 13, until it had a baby, and then you did the only decent thing. You took your bits and put them back into the environment instead of taking the food out of your grandchild's mouth. But then comes better sanitation and germ theory, and we doubled the lifespan. We're about to double the lifespan again. This is the number of hours worked around the world. We used to, imagine the world was an amazing place. You'd be in nature. It was short and brutish with 80-hour work weeks. And while we've increased the quality of life around the world, we've halved the number of hours that people need to work to maintain that quality of life. Automotive and airline accidents, right? Airplanes are, in fact, the safest way to travel around the planet, unless you watch CNN repeat the crash over and over and over again. And of course, in the blue line, automotive, we have 1.25 million deaths a year. But guess what? As we start bringing in autonomous cars, that will go to 0 as well. Global death rates from natural catastrophes. Look at this plummeting in the number of deaths from natural catastrophes. It didn't happen because we became psychic. It's the impact of better technology to predict the disasters and to get help in the golden hour after disaster occurs. It used to be dangerous to have a baby. Age-adjusted maternal mortality rates have plummeted. So why is this going on? Why is it happening now? It's definitely not better politicians, that's for sure. And we haven't gotten smarter. All of these, and in the back of my book, Abundance, I have 80 pages of charts just like this, is the impact of exponential technologies. It's the impact of the technologies you're here to learn about, here to use, that you're developing, that you're putting into business. And the realization is that these technologies do help us make the world better at an accelerating rate. So looking at some of these technologies, right, this is the bandwidth cost. Dollars per gigabit have plummeted from $1,200 in 99 to effectively free. I remember in 99, one of my companies, my biggest cost was bandwidth on Akamai. It was ridiculous. And now it's all there, right? Here's dollars per million transistors, $200 down to effectively zero today. Storage costs, dollars per gigabyte, again, $600 in 1992 down to zero effectively today. And I love this chart. So back in 2000, I've started 17 companies so far. Back on number 13 or whatever it was, back in 2000, it was a $5 million startup for the bandwidth, for the servers, for the people, for the software, all of that. Enter open source and then AWS in the cloud, we're down to $5,000, right? 1,000 times cheaper. What that means is that we have the ability to try 1,000 times more experiments. And one of the most amazing things about the world we live in today is our ability to experiment and fail and iterate and start again and experiment and fail and iterate and start again. And that creates extraordinary progress. So what we're seeing is a world in which faster, cheaper computers are the growth medium, that's the foundation, it's upon which all these other technologies are growing. Networks, sensors, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, VR, blockchain, AI. All of these technologies you're going to be hearing about are growing on top of Moore's law, right? When Intel started with their 1971 Intel 4004 to NVIDIA's GPU, 100 billion-fold price improvement. And that 100 billion-fold price improvement is driving all of these as well. So the realization and what drives me in the companies I start and the work that I do is that back 1,000 years ago, the only people who could change the world were the kings and the queens. And even the best they could do was sort of deploy their military troops or change monetary policy. 100 years ago was the robber barons, the industrialists, who could build the railroads, the steel mills, the schools. Today, we're living in a world where all of us can, any of us can, if we truly want to solve the world's biggest problems. Because technology is empowering us more than ever before. And really, it's knowledge of the problem. You know, I teach at Singularity University that the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. Want to become a billionaire? Help a billion people. That mindset, that mantra, is what I think permeates our startups, or the 60-odd startups that we see here from the Global Solutions Program and from our two spring and fall accelerators. It also permeates what we do at the X Prize Foundation. I have the pleasure of being the founder and executive chairman of X Prize and Singularity. Just hired a new CEO, Marcus Shingles, who's here. You'll be hearing from Marcus later in this program. But we've awarded or have active $116 million in X Prizes. Another $100 million are in development. Because the realization is that you can put out a clear, measurable target and say, I don't care where you went to school, what you've ever done before, if you solve this problem, you win, and we all win. And the ability to solve those problems is now resident in people, individuals, and small teams around the world where it only used to be a few governments. And for me, that gives me the greatest hope, right? That the number of people solving problems is exploding. So I want to close on the last part of this conversation, which is one of the most important changes that's going on around the world today. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's part of the conversation you need to be thinking through. So I call it the rising billion. This is the world's population growth rate. We've just crossed the 7 billion mark, and hopefully, if you were worried about population growth pressures, the comments I made a few minutes ago will reduce it, because in fact, we'll probably peak at 9.5 billion people, and then very rapidly reduce. But that wasn't the purpose of the slide. Back in 2010, we had 1.8 billion people connected on planet Earth. In 2020, the low estimate is that we're going to have 5 billion people connected, which means 3 billion new consumers are coming online. Now, the opportunities for these 3 billion, this long tail, these are 3 billion people who have never banked, never bought insurance, never, uploaded or downloaded, never sold. What are they going to want to buy? What are they going to create? It's a massive opportunity. But guess what? It doesn't stop there, right? Because this guy wants to put drones and satellites to connect the other half of the world. Google is using balloons and drones and satellites to connect the entire world. Elon has proposed a 4,000 satellite constellation, which is still years out. But right now, Richard Branson, Paul Jacobs, and Greg Weiler have funded a 648 satellite constellation called OneWeb that will be operating by 2020 that will connect every single person on the planet. So what happens when not 5 billion, but 8 billion people on planet Earth are all of a sudden connected? They're not coming online like I did on 9600 baud on AOL, right? They're coming online with a megabit connection, with access to the world's information. They're coming online with access to AI. They want to spin up 1,000 processor cores in AWS? No problem, you can do it. We're talking about a massive amount of power connected to the human mind share. We are wiring the global nervous system. We're connecting 8 billion humans. If Ray were here, he would talk about his prediction that in the early 2030s, we're heading towards a world where we're going to start connecting the human cortex to the cloud. Let me remind you that early 2030s is like 15 years away. It's like tomorrow. And so what happens all of a sudden when 8 billion people are connected to the cloud and connected to themselves? I think about this. I think about this a lot. I think about a world in which we have a level of connected intimacy like never before. A world in which I can feel, know, and understand what people are doing around the world. Right? Each of us think of ourselves as, I'm Peter, I'm you, or each of you, right? We are a collection of 10 trillion human cells, each an individual life form, that make us up as an individual. 10 trillion individual life forms make up you. But because you're connected and you work in unison, you do amazing things together, you would no longer take a knife and stab your arm than, anything else. So imagine a world that's so connected, a world of abundance where you can meet the needs of every man, woman, and child, right? This is the world that we talk about here at SU. It's a world of, thousands of new billion-dollar companies. It's a world of radical transparency. It's a world of incredible abundance. It's a world of hope. And along the next 20 years on the journey to getting there, there will be turbulence, no question. There will be terrorism, there will be challenges, there will be the use of this technology to do a lot of negative things. There will be, technological socialism where people are supported by technology at the same time that people lose their jobs. And so as you're here building new companies, as you're here tapping into capital, as you're here tapping into incredible technologists and amazing business models, you're also here to be having the conversation about how are we shaping the world ahead? Because these kinds of conversations have to take place someplace. These 5 billion new minds coming online that are driving tens of trillions of dollars into the global economy are also 5 billion new minds are going to create this massive increase in innovation. If you think the world is fast, you haven't seen anything yet. You haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything yet. We're about to hit an inflection point in global innovation and creation. Just wait till quantum computing comes online. Just wait until AI fully comes online. Wait till 5 billion new people come online. By the way, guys, this isn't 50 years from now. This is now. This is the next 10 years, right now. We're going to be reinventing every aspect of our lives, how we govern our society, how we raise our children, how we educate them. What are the expectations around privacy, around jobs? How do you get your meaning from life if all of a sudden everything is provided for you? These are the conversations, right? And each of these problems, if you see a problem there, take a second to do that little neural flip and say, okay, it's a problem. It's a massive opportunity. Massive opportunity. Are you with me on this? Yeah. So these are the conversations that need to be going on. At the same time that we're connecting 8 billion people, my friends at Cisco talk about the Internet of Everything. We're going from some 20 billion connected devices today to 50 to 100 billion connected devices in the next 5 years. And by the way, on each of those connected devices are a dozen sensors. We're heading towards a world of a trillion sensor economy. Imagine a world in which you can know anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want. A world in which there's almost perfect knowledge. It's the quality of the questions you ask in the future. Not, can I know it? Yes, you can know it. And your version of Jarvis, and we'll hear from Neil Jacobstein, our illustrious professor on AI, to talk about this. Your version of Jarvis will help you gather that data. It's the quality of the questions you're going to ask. We are living during the most amazing time ever to be alive. We truly are. I hope that you, at this summit over the next 2.5 days, get as excited about the future as I am. That you take responsibility about the future. Guys, the world is about to change dramatically, and you're in the midst of it. I say that not as to be scary. I say that because that's what we're seeing. These are trends that are not slowing down. The rate of change is accelerating. How you tap into that to create an extraordinary world for you and your family is up to you. But I'll tell you this, we represent 0.00001% of the world's population thinking about this stuff. And so with that great knowledge comes great responsibility. If you'd like these slides, you can just, if you text only your email to that number, you'll get a download of these slides. And you're going to be hearing from me over the next couple of days. I'll be sharing the stage, helping to bring in the amazing speakers. It is an honor and a pleasure. I'm so excited for our SU alums and so excited for the folks coming to this SU family. We welcome you, an honor and a pleasure. Thank you all very much.